In the summer of 1991, a troubled musician drove through Malibu, searching for something he could never seem to find. For decades, he had stood beside the biggest names in music history. He had played with legends. He had topped the charts. He had earned the admiration of millions. Yet, behind the applause, Billy Preston was fighting a battle that nobody could hear. The public knew him as a joyful performer whose infectious smile lit up every stage he touched. They knew him as the keyboard wizard who transformed songs into classics and helped shape the sound of an entire generation. But fame had become a mask. Years of buried trauma, addiction, loneliness, and self-destruction had pushed him toward a breaking point. The scandal that erupted in 1991 shocked fans and stained a reputation that had taken decades to build. Yet the story of Billy Preston is far more complicated than a simple rise and fall. It is the story of a child prodigy who became a musical giant, a man who stood shoulder to shoulder with rock royalty, and an artist whose greatest battle was never on stage. It was within himself. Billy Preston entered the world in Houston, Texas, in 1946. Music surrounded him from the beginning. His family was deeply connected to the church, and gospel music flowed through every part of his childhood. Before most children learned multiplication tables, Billy was teaching himself how to play piano. Nobody showed him scales. Nobody gave him formal lessons. Yet somehow he could hear melodies and recreate them almost instantly. People around him quickly realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. When his family moved to Los Angeles, opportunities appeared everywhere. Churches invited him to perform. Musicians wanted to work with him. Audiences couldn't believe such powerful music was coming from someone so young. Before reaching his teenage years, Billy was already appearing on television and performing alongside established entertainers. His future seemed limitless, but while audiences saw a gifted child living a dream, another reality existed behind closed doors. The young musician would later describe experiences that left emotional scars he carried throughout his entire life. Those wounds remained hidden from the public. For years, they remained hidden even from those closest to him. As Billy continued growing as a musician, the pain quietly grew with him. By the early 1960s, Billy Preston was no longer simply a talented child. He was becoming a professional musician. One opportunity led him to the touring band of Little Richard, one of rock and roll's most explosive performers. For a teenager, it was an education unlike any music school could provide. Night after night, Billy learned how great performers commanded audiences. He learned discipline. He learned showmanship. Most importantly, he learned confidence. Then came a moment that would change his life forever. While touring in Europe, Billy encountered 4 young musicians from Liverpool. They called themselves the Beatles. At the time, nobody could have predicted how important that meeting would become. The Beatles were rapidly transforming popular music. Billy was building a reputation as one of the most talented keyboard players alive. Years later, their paths would cross again under very different circumstances, and when they did, history would be made. By the end of the 1960s, the Beatles were facing serious problems. Internal tensions were growing. Arguments had become common. The atmosphere inside the studio often felt uncomfortable. When Billy Preston joined the group's recording sessions, something remarkable happened. The mood changed. Musicians who had spent months frustrating one another suddenly seemed energized. Billy brought positivity. He brought enthusiasm. And above all, he brought incredible talent. His keyboard work added warmth and soul to the band's music. Even more importantly, his presence reminded the Beatles why they had fallen in love with making music in the first place. John Lennon was reportedly so impressed that he suggested making Billy a permanent member. The idea never became reality, but the nickname stayed. The Fifth Beatle. It was one of the greatest compliments any musician could receive. Billy had become more than a collaborator. He had become part of music history. Many people remember Billy Preston for his connections to famous artists. What they sometimes forget is that he was a superstar himself. During the 1970s, his solo career exploded. His music blended gospel passion, funk energy, and pop accessibility. Audiences loved it. Hit after hit climbed the charts. His performances became must-see events. At one point, Billy was working with an astonishing list of artists: the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, George Harrison, Eric Clapton, countless others. Few musicians could move so effortlessly between genres. Fewer still could earn the respect of such diverse performers. His success seemed unstoppable. Money flowed in, awards followed, fame grew larger every year. Yet the pressure of maintaining that success was becoming heavier, and beneath the surface, old struggles remained unresolved. The smiling performer on stage was fighting battles that no audience could see. As the years passed, Billy's personal life became increasingly complicated. Questions about identity, relationships, and self-acceptance weighed heavily on him. The music industry of that era was not always welcoming toward people who lived outside traditional expectations. Many performers felt pressured to hide parts of themselves. Billy was among them. At the same time, he struggled with substance abuse. What may have begun as an escape gradually became dependence. The more successful he became, the more isolated he often felt. Friends noticed changes. Professional opportunities became harder to maintain. The joyful energy that once defined him occasionally gave way to instability. The public saw only fragments of what was happening. Most fans remained unaware of the emotional storm building behind the scenes. Then everything began to collapse. The 1990s brought a series of events that transformed Billy Preston's public image. Legal troubles generated headlines. Court appearances replaced concert appearances. Stories that once celebrated his talent now focused on controversy. For someone who had spent decades earning admiration, the change was devastating. His struggles with addiction worsened the situation. Repeated violations and legal problems created a cycle that seemed impossible to escape. Eventually, prison became a reality. For many celebrities, incarceration marks the end of a career. For Billy Preston, it became something unexpected, a turning point. Inside prison walls, stripped of fame and distractions, he found himself reconnecting with the music that had first inspired him as a child. He played piano. He participated in religious services. He rediscovered the spiritual foundation that had guided his earliest years. For the first time in a long while, healing seemed possible. After leaving prison, Billy slowly rebuilt his life. The comeback was quieter than his rise to fame. There were no screaming crowds, no chart-topping singles, no glamorous headlines. Instead, there was music, pure music. He contributed to respected recording projects and reunited with old friends in the industry. Fellow musicians still recognized his extraordinary gift. The years had taken a toll on his body, however. Health problems became increasingly serious. Medical treatments helped for a time, but complications continued. Despite these challenges, Billy kept performing whenever he could. Every appearance felt meaningful. Every song carried the wisdom of someone who understood how fragile life could be. Then, in late 2005, tragedy struck. A severe medical crisis left him unconscious. The man who had spent his life creating beautiful sounds could no longer speak for himself. On June 6, 2006, Billy Preston passed away at the age of 59. Bringing an end to one of the most extraordinary and complicated careers in modern music. News of his death spread quickly across the industry, prompting an outpouring of grief from musicians, producers, and fans around the world. For many, it felt as though a vital piece of music history had been lost. Preston had spent nearly his entire life behind a keyboard, creating sounds that helped shape generations of popular music. In the days that followed, tributes arrived from every corner of the entertainment world, artists who had shared stages, recording studios, and unforgettable moments with him reflected on his remarkable contributions. Some praised his unmatched ability to bring life to any song he touched. Others spoke about his generosity, his sense of humor, and the warmth he carried even during difficult periods of his life. Behind the fame was a man who genuinely loved music and the people who made it. What made Billy Preston unique was his extraordinary versatility. He was never confined to a single genre or musical movement. Raised in the traditions of gospel music, he developed a deep understanding of rhythm, emotion, and spiritual expression. As his career evolved, he carried those foundations into rhythm and blues, rock, funk, and pop. Whether he was performing in a church, a recording studio, or a packed arena, his playing carried a distinctive energy that audiences immediately recognized. His influence extended far beyond his own records. Throughout his career, Preston collaborated with some of the most celebrated artists of the 20th century. He contributed to recordings that became cultural landmarks and helped define entire eras of music. His keyboard work added depth, color, and soul to songs that are still played decades later. Many listeners may not have realized they were hearing Billy Preston, but they were often listening to his artistry whenever those classic tracks came on the radio. One of the reasons his legacy remains so powerful is that he never sought attention solely for himself. While many performers chased the spotlight, Preston often focused on serving the music. He understood how to elevate the work of others while still leaving a signature touch of his own. That rare combination earned him the respect of fellow musicians, many of whom considered him one of the finest keyboard players they had ever encountered. His journey, however, was not without hardship. Personal struggles, addiction, legal troubles, and emotional wounds complicated his life and sometimes overshadowed his achievements. Those chapters cannot be ignored because they were part of his story. Yet they do not tell the whole story. The same man who faced those challenges also created music that inspired millions and brought joy to countless listeners. Today, Billy Preston's name continues to carry enormous respect among musicians and music historians. His recordings remain influential, his performances continue to be studied, and his contributions are still celebrated.